Okay, we are live.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present except for Councilman Rich Swirsky. We did hold a meeting last week and discuss one item. Can I get approval of those minutes, please?
Motion to approve the previous minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thanks. Moving forward, we do have one old piece that we'll briefly discuss if the sponsor wants to, and then we have a discussion on gun violence in our city. Councilwoman Samples.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Kamer. This piece was brought in last week. It is a resolution urging the Senate to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Through the Senate, it's already passed through the Congress. I know there was a question about whether Senator Sherrod Brown had supported it or not. I was waiting on his aide to send me over a formal email, but if you actually go to Senator Brown's website, he supported it early on. And also as of this past week, when President Biden was doing his 100 days in office address, he also stated in front of all of America to get this passed. So I am hoping that this committee will pass it out for a vote tonight.
All right, thank you. Let's see if there's any questions or comments. Oops. I don't see any questions or comments. The only two issues I have, Councilwoman, is obviously the qualified immunity. I did read through some of this, and I'm not sure if you can answer this. If not, we can move forward. I do know it addresses body cameras, but mostly through grants. What I would like to see, hopefully the Senate can do this, is make sure that every police department in the United States would comply and make sure that their officers would have body cameras. I'm not sure if you can talk to that, but it looks like with what I read, it's more like applying for grants, where I would like to see, I'll be honest, mandatory that every police department has those body cameras. So it's more transparent throughout the United States. Even to expand on it, that police cruisers would have the dash cams. So I was thinking, like, just off the top of my head over the weekend, that, you know, if the Senate could make it mandatory where every police department would have to comply within like a 2-year period or something like that. That's what I see. That's my only. If we made an amendment to it, I would support it 100% like that. If we could say, hey, Senator Brown, Portman, and others, if you can really try to get rid of the qualified immunity part, and then basically make it where every police department, even within their budgets, they need to really think about strategizing within their budgets, every municipality, township, county government, that there are body cameras that should be bought. So that's where I stand with this. So I don't know if you have any comments in regards to that, but you know, if the committee wants to move forward, I'm okay with that. But I would probably cast a no vote just because of that reason. That's it. I want more in regards to that, the body cameras, and then also, I mean, we're trying to hire locally here in the city of Akron. I think the message that we're sending with this is you could get hired on the police department, but be sued civilly or personally. So do you have any other comments or questions, Councilwoman Samples?
So a comment to what you stated, Chairman Kamer, about the officers having to have body cameras mandatory. Absolutely. I wouldn't mind putting an amendment in there, but again, at the end of the day, I guess the Senate would have to say on that. I don't mind putting that in there. I can't speak for the rest of my council members, but I'm not going to touch the qualified immunity. I would leave that up to the Senate to address. It's something that I support, but I absolutely support the body worn cameras mandatory, because there are some municipalities that do give officers an option. So I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, thanks.
Users.
All right.
I don't mind an amendment to that part, but the qualified immunity, I would leave that up to the Senate.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, committee members? I see Councilman Malik.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak in favor of the resolution. I think that this is, it is a very broad and comprehensive package, but I think most of the things are things everyone can get behind. I understand the concern that folks have around qualified immunity and getting rid of it. But at the same time, I just would like to point out that it's a shield to personal liability, even in cases in which, you know, an officer is found to have violated someone's rights. And so in that case, you know, I think that is already a high bar to establish that under the law in court. And so if we're talking about those kinds of incidents, I don't think those are incidents in which there's, you know, we're not saying, you know, that someone's going to get sued for the regular course of action. But if there's something that's so extreme that a court is going to find that there were rights that were violated, I'm not sure that that shouldn't be a bar, and that shouldn't be something that someone can be sued personally over. So that's my 2 cents on it, but I do support this piece.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Any other committee members, council members? All right, I'll leave it up to the committee if they're ready to move forward.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman Linda Mobian.
I'm sorry I couldn't find my button. But anyway, yes, I strongly support the measure, and whatever the committee wants to do, I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
So I would absolutely want to move this out of committee and bring in a substitute, adding the body worn camera amendment to that. I have reached out to Ellen on that. So there will be an amendment that will come in on the body worn camera piece of it. So I am requesting that we move it out of committee.
Okay, thanks.
I'll make
Anybody
a
want
motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
All right, thanks. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll say nay.
I'll do a roll call on that.
Nay.
I'm not sure if I heard everyone.
All right, thanks.
Hamer,
Nay.
Samples,
Aye.
Mollis,
Aye.
McKittrick.
Nay.
The vote on that is 2-2, so it does not pass out of committee.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, moving forward, we do have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety here, Charlie Brown, and we're going to discuss the topic of gun violence. If somehow we do not make it and get all our answers to our questions and comments by 1 p.m., hopefully, or even if we do get everything accomplished, hopefully maybe in the future, I was thinking about this over the weekend, maybe in about 6 weeks, we can get another update on what's going on in the city. But for right now, this is a start. And I'll turn it over to Charlie Brown, and he can introduce everybody that will be involved in today's discussion. Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kramer and members of the Public Safety Committee. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share what we're doing in Akron to address this national trend. Clearly, you guys know, read the paper and look at social media about how this gun violence has gone up in most, if not many, of our major cities. So with that, I just wanted to let you know the first person I'm going to speak to is Major Lisa. He is one that pretty much crafted what we're doing in response to gun violence in the city. So Major Lisa is the subdivision command for the investigative subdivision. So Major Lisa.
Mr. Brown, thank you. And thanks to City Council for allowing us the opportunity to speak about what we do in relations to gun violence. Our initiative started in 2018, where we realized we needed to have a more formulated plan on how we were going to approach gun violence in the city. I'm going to outline the plan for you. It's not a static plan, but this is the foundation of the plan. The senior leadership team here at the Akron Police Department always assesses the plan and grows the plan as needed for where opportunities lie. And one thing could be new grants that might come up as the years go by, might be something we pivot and go to. So in 2018, we held meetings and we took a really deep dive and examined internally where we needed to get better as a department. And we also had the Bureau of Justice Assistance come in related to gun violence, but specifically with gang violence, and do an assessment of the police department on how we approach it. And we received very favorable reviews from BJA from their assessment. So I'm going to outline some of the 5 things that we identified where we need to get better, and then I'll take a deeper dive into each one of those as I go along. So areas where we needed to focus in 2018, one was increased team building and partnerships. Look for force multipliers and other resources we could pull in to help us combat gun violence. We want to make sure that we use data and analytics to identify problem areas and people most likely involved in gun violence. We sought out any and all grant opportunities to help fund the initiative. And then also we need to work down breaking down communication barriers, focusing our mission internally on gun violence. That had to be our #1 focus. And then also we wanted to involve more community partners as we grew this process to educate people on what we do as a department so they knew all the hard work, and also to make important connections where people felt more comfortable talking to the police about problems they're having in their community. So I mentioned that we needed to break down communication barriers. And so units within the department needed to communicate better internally. The Anti-Violence Bureau we have, Patrol, Detective Bureau, the crimes that were being reported and the individuals involved intersect all units of the department. And so really we had to work, how do we communicate if it's a gun violence reduction team issue, are the major crimes detectives aware of it, and also Patrol involved in it. So we kind of utilized things such as field interview cards. We also would pull personnel to identify known offenders that were either likely to be victims or suspects of gun violence to identify who they are. And we also made it a real strident effort to focus our information and be purposeful in our communication internally about who's being arrested, who's being victimized, what are the correlations and relationships between each one, so everybody was on the same page. Nobody had any missing information or extra information that wasn't being shared.
Hey, Major, real quick, if you could, can you explain what a field interview card is?
Yes, sir. So every time, most times when police officers have contact with somebody, this person could be a suspect of a crime. We do what's called a field interview card, and it's recorded in our CAD system, in our RMS system, documenting that we spoke to so-and-so on such a date. It could be related to somebody that was in the area of a shots fired call that matched a description, and we'll simply put down in the area matched description of a shooting suspect and stated that they were not involved. But that alone isn't much, but if you end up, okay, this is the 3rd time in a shots fired call, now we have more information that this person really might be related to something that's going on. So we want to make sure that we use that data, that we analyze that data to see if there's any trends that we can pull from it. So a field interview card is one thing that we do. Also internally, it's what we call request for information. And so we're very diligent about putting out requests for information within the department. So if a crime occurred, that individual officer detective will let the department know this crime occurred and they're requesting information. They give a little background on it. So everybody has just a better knowledge of what's going on in the city as far as it relates to gun crime. That answer that question, Mr. Brown? That help? Okay. So we want to make sure we had a singular focused mission to identify gun offenders and reduce gun violence. So that would be a new mission for our narcotics, our street narcotics, to prioritize drug dealers that are known to possess weapons and use weapons dealing drugs. We increased our partnerships with federal and state agencies. So the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, they're all embedded with the police department. And familiarity breeds partnerships and strengths. And we work with them every day. And we also work with Adult Parole Authority, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Summit County Prosecutor's Office. We realize that's a great force multiplier. We can only handle so much of a problem. Their resources that they provide, the people that they provide, and also the data that they provide is very beneficial to us. So we've really worked hard to strengthen those relationships. The U.S. Attorney's Office and county prosecutors have dedicated a singular prosecutor to gun violence, and that helps with identifying gun cases and then having a clear chain of command on who's prosecuting them and what's the expectations of detectives handling those crimes. What does the prosecutor need to get a successful prosecution? We also wanted to grow partnerships within the community. Last year, when we started that initiative, of course, COVID hit and it really hampered what we could do with those certain community groups. But we wanted to identify churches and businesses that were extremely hard hit with gun violence, that they would be in the area. And that way we could meet with core people in the groups that they could also then pass the message on to other people in their community about what we do, about what our initiative is, how to contact us, what support we need from the community, and also find out what's going on when they're there every day to talk to us. So we really wanted to get down at the street level with open communication. Unfortunately, COVID really hampered that, but that's something we're going to pick back up as people become more vaccinated and the CDC controls or guidelines are lifted. But we partnership with the House of the Lord and also the Arlington Church of God, Akron Metropolitan Housing Association to have free conversation going back and forth. Using data, and so this is our primary tool to prioritize decisions in the future. No more sweeps, no more zero tolerance. That's a bygone era. We wanted to make sure that we were really driven by data to identify where we needed to be. So we use that data to drive our specialty units and our directed patrols. So part of it is we'll have crime mapping. Our analysts will look at crime mapping and they'll look at shots fired in the city. They look at it every so often and they'll create a heat map of where are the most shots fired incidents occurring. And we can also do another layer on that to have other crimes. So if we layer on top of that same heat map where the drug offenses are being reported, and shockingly, you'll see that there's a correlation between shots fired and drug incidents. So we make sure that we're really focused on where we send our resources, that we go into those specific areas with the data about who's the known offenders, what area of the city it's occurring in, and what other crimes are related to those for the heat mapping. We want to make sure that we're going there to help people that are being victimized most by the gun violence. And the large area that we shifted recently was we arrest a lot of people for gun violence, but sentencing can have little teeth sometimes. So part of it is when a patrol officer makes an arrest for a weapons charge, they don't have the ability to be the ombudsman for their case. They hand it off to a prosecutor, and it's hard to have the communication back and forth. If they work nights, and the prosecutors need more information or some follow-up, there wasn't anybody to do it. So that was one of the areas of a miss we identified. So we knew we had to get better with that. So now we have our gun violence reduction team. They partner with the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Summit County Prosecutor's Office, and our analysts. And they meet every day to discuss every single gun arrest that we make in the week. And that's the purpose of that meeting, is to identify where should this person be prosecuted in what court system. Is by their background, their violent background, would they be better suited for federal court, or by their background should be in state court? And so they meet and discuss those each and every case. Training is also a big area that we really want to emphasize. We utilize outside training resources when available, but we also train internally. ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm, the gun violence reduction team, will visit and roll calls, train officers on being safe and identifying indicators of weapons offenses and how to interview people, what information is needed for successful prosecution. We've also had the U.S. Attorney's Office have held multiple training sessions with key players in the department to educate us on federal laws. And then we've also actively sought out and received grant money that will allow us to do these in a normal course of business. It's hard for the average calls for service that we respond to get enough people together to one, to analyze the data, to come up with a plan, what we're going to do with this data. So we're very focused on it. So the grant money allows us to do this in addition to our normal course of business. So I'll talk about some of the trends on shots fired and weapon seizures. So every day we record every shots fired incident in the city. And we've seen from this year to last year, we've had a 26% increase in those calls. So for example, in April, we had 231 cases of a shots fired or shooting call for a month. For context, last month or last year, same month, 221. Previous was 154, 133, all the way back to 102. So we've over doubled in 5.5 years of shooting calls in the city. Now we're focused and we know where the shots fired are. So when we have personnel available, we respond to them and are working very digitally. And we've been very successful. So for example, weapon seizures. Now this is the end result of these focused efforts that Patrol and the Anti-Violence Bureau do. So weapon seizures this month or last month in April, we seized 111 weapons in 1 month. The year previous, we only seized 56 weapons. So we're working harder, we're working smarter, but it's still quite a storm out there. We seized almost 1,000 weapons last year total. If you go back 4 years, it was 700 weapons. So the trends are we're seizing weapons, but we're still getting a high volume and a high amount of shots fired calls in the city. That's not unique to Akron. That's a national trend that everywhere is seeing a uptick in violent crime. The causes of it are still kind of, we're in the eye of the storm, so it's hard to tell what's the cause of it. Is it, theories on if it's COVID related or other things or the economy or just a myriad of things. So we can't identify the reasons for it, but I think you'll see why the results, the uptick in firearm seizures and prosecutions, that we're definitely working hard and are aware of the problem and have partnered with external stakeholders wherever needed to keep the program going forward. We hope to continue more of our initiatives once vaccines have been, more vaccine is out and the CDC restrictions are lifted as well. And that's all I have, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thanks, Major. Major Capers, if you could share a patrol or uniform perspective.
Yes, I can. Because we work so closely together as an organization, some of this will sound a little repetitive, but our officers on a shift basis and on an individual basis are in regular communication with our partners in the Detective Bureau, with our federal partners on a one-to-one basis, and that is a key focus for patrol. It's our piece in the overall plan that Major Leeser referred to. When we are on calls for service involving shots fired or gun violence where people are injured, they take that as a cue to incorporate the gun violence response team into the initial response. And we're doing a very good job of recognizing those calls for service that merit including the gun violence team in a preliminary investigation. Councilperson Amobian, I see your hands up. And I can't hear you. I believe you're muted.
Yeah, I put my hand up for the chair to
Oh,
recognize either now or later. I'm not sure how she's doing it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If we could, maybe, Major, can you continue going and then we'll take questions? Sure. Okay.
Sure. Our officers are hearing our message that our desire is to be data-driven, to not be doing what we used to be doing, which was stopping a lot of people in a given area. And always the goal was good to get guns off the street, but this allows us to be more precise with the stops that we're making, relying on data, relying on intelligence. The officers go so far as to, on their own, go to open source information on the internet to discover information that might not be available through police reports that'll help them target their efforts. With that, they're sharing and receiving information that helps them target exactly the people that we're looking for. And that may be one explanation for why we're getting more guns off the street, because the stops that we make are more often resulting in gun seizures. Patrols in regular communication with the Summit County Sheriff's Office, any time of the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have an offender that we need to get accepted into jail because we know as soon as they leave our presence, they're going to be getting another gun and attempting to do violence. We work with them to try to get our prisoners accepted into the jail. And that has been increasingly effective of late. Patrol shift commanders are provided access to heat maps, and a heat map is an outlined geographical area where there have been a certain growth, or I guess a high density of a certain crime. In this case, we're talking about gun crimes, and based on those heat maps, they're able to share that information with their staffs, and their staffs, when they're not on calls for service for other items, can focus their efforts in those areas. And again, we can spend our time more efficiently attacking the gun violence issue. And of course, patrol is an integral part of the overall APD approach to attacking gun violence.
Thanks, Major. If Mr. Cameron, if I could just add a couple things with respect to educational efforts that the department's doing. As you guys know, at your ward meetings, there's educational material that's there available for the folks who attend. There's gun locks could be made available. And then it's so important to work with the community to get information and give information. So those things are important. We'll continue to do those things, or they will continue to do those things to help reduce this gun violence. So with that, Mr. Cameron, if it's your pleasure, we'll answer any questions that we have. If we don't have the answers, we'll get those for you. And you mentioned 6 weeks from now or there, so about if we want to have another meeting, please just let me know, and we'll make the majors available to the committee. Thanks for your time.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate everybody speaking. I'll start with, because I don't see no committee members' hands up. I do know Councilwoman Omobian wanted to speak earlier, so I'll call on her first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, I was wondering if the officer who spoke before, Deputy Chief Capers, could address this question. He talked about a lot of the violence occurring all over the country, and I think we see that is a reality based on what we see on television. Just curious, I was recently asked a question about we were doing all this broadband talk, and I don't, profess to understand all this stuff, but someone talked about communities that are putting cameras on poles in communities where you can actually see what's happening in those communities. And I don't know, have we explored anything like that? Do you know if there's any kind of technology or anything available like that in communities where we find that crime is high, and I don't know all of the legality of putting something like that up. Is there a way that we could explore installing cameras to see if we could identify some of these participants in all of this crime? Because I think as we talk about crime in our community, certainly there are certain areas where you have a higher percentage of the activity occurring. Just curious as to if that's something that makes sense. I don't know all the ins and outs. It just sounded like something that could be helpful in identifying individuals that are really causing this kind of havoc in our community.
Sure, I'll answer that question. If we have, or they have explored that, did some benchmarking in other cities, in particular Canton, to look at what type of solutions they're using for cameras. We'll continue to do that, and we're gonna really try to focus on those types of technology pieces to help us, whether it's cameras or talking to people. So yes, absolutely, any technology we can use, we will continue to look for that and execute on it.
Is it affordable, Mr. Brown?
We're looking at some pricings. We have our technology, the captain's in charge of technology. He's looking at that and has met with some folks in Canton well to see what we can do for leveraging the best price. We're looking at communication or work or cooperation with the county to look at, again, leveraging great prices for that. So we are
Okay.
going to work on it. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm going to go in. I believe this is the order, but I do got a couple hands raised. Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Major Leeser, Major Capers. I guess as a first question, Major Leeser, when we talk about data, and definitely appreciate the data-driven focus, what are the trends that we're seeing? What proportion of the gun crimes that we're seeing are related to drugs? What proportion are, sort of lower level disputes between, younger, youth? I mean, what is the distribution that we're seeing? What is the total number of folks who are involved with these crimes? Are we seeing the same couple dozen people who are, disproportionately involved in incidents? What are the trends that you're seeing?
Thank you for that question. So as Major Capers and I both mentioned earlier, heat mapping is one form of data that we utilize to identify the geographical areas where crimes are occurring. So we also will pull in information from our record management system on individuals that have been arrested and overlaying those addresses, arrested for gun and you live in the area of the gun, is that information that we need to be aware of. Gang members are also overlaid in these maps. So, where they live and where they conduct their criminal activity, one of those locations as well. So as far as having a clear picture of what all the gun violence is related to, it's very difficult because it takes to identify the suspect in necessary shooting incident. So if there's what could be characterized as a drive-by shooting, if we don't have the suspects in hand, it's hard to identify the motive behind the crime. So we don't have a clear picture as to what all the crimes are related to, but yes, there will be some gang activity. Yes, there'll be some individuals looking to rob people. Yes, there's individuals just looking to harm somebody else. So we are diving in more information into our homicide victims to identify what was the underlying cause. But even with those, it's some difficult because we don't always have an MO or a motive behind the crime, but we're trying to get a better picture on it to see if that helps us identify key points to focus on. But we do work on identifying individuals that have been arrested, that are known gang members, and what locations they're in, and mapping that with where the gun crime is occurring as well, so we can utilize our resources more effectively.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick follow-up. With regard to the gun violence reduction team, I know that I believe there's going to be some additional members joining. And what is sort of the plan? I know you said that the community outreach really was kind of hampered substantially by COVID, but what is sort of the plan for how those additional officers will operate within the team? And then what is the plan with regard to rolling out some more of that community engagement? Because I think that's, obviously a critical piece, the folks who are there every day in the neighborhood, if there's the trust level there, may be able to shed some light on some of these questions that we might not have answers for.
Yes, the gun violence reduction team is it's an outstanding unit that was formed maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and they're able to focus on some short and long-term investigations, which patrol can't do long-term investigations. So that was an area we were kind of missing. We plugged them in. They're running at about a half capacity as far as personnel from when they first started. They actually have half as many personnel. So internally, we have to balance when we post those positions that we're taking people from patrol, and the all-encompassing work that is patrol, from traffic accidents to domestic violence to the robberies, the shopliftings, the checking patrols in the neighborhood, the dealing with youth crime, even if it isn't serious. That is all something that patrol does every day. And so when we pull somebody out of that, we really have to balance where people come from and to strike a good balance. We did apply for a cops hiring grant, and we had a plan to outline to post people into positions, some being gun violence reduction team, some being our neighborhood response team, and also Project Safe Neighborhoods with the FBI as well. So as you know, right now we're hiring. We have a recruitment drive to get more people on the police department. We are, because of timing, have a huge number of retirements that we're trying to stay above and stay afloat. So it's striking that balance of where, taking people out of patrol to fill other needs. So there's going to be some gaps there as well, and patrol shifts that are already kind of running short on personnel.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Here's the order I have going on. I have Councilman Freeman, Councilwoman Samples, and Councilman Fusco. Councilman Freeman, you're next unless you want to yield to Samples.
You know what? If I can jump in right here, because I'm not going to be able to listen to the rest of the meeting, I would appreciate that. So,
sure.
Couple questions. I remember several years ago at National League of Cities, I talked with a vendor about the shots fired program. I think Canton was using it. As I recall, that was a pretty expensive piece. I'd like to hear a little bit about that. Also, I know in the past we've always had concerns. There's been concerns expressed about, I guess what we'd call random profiling. It sounds like there's still going to be areas of the city that you are focused on, but it's not going to be random. It's going to be driven by data. So if we have someone approach us about, profiling, we can say, well, they're in this area because it's data driven. And one other question, which has slipped my mind right now. So if I could hear about those two things, either today or in the future, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I can't see if Deputy Mayor Brown is still here or not.
He's here.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Brown, did you want to continue to address the issue of the shot spotter, or do you want somebody else to?
Yeah, I'll jump in. We've been to some other conferences and talked to folks about the utility of shot spotters systems. Some departments, even regionally, have gone away from it. So, I mean, if that technology gets better, and we would continue to look at that as well. But it is very expensive, Mr. Freeman, no doubt. And then the second part of your question about profiling, I think you got your answer with respect. It's going to be data driven, more laser focused and purposeful for folks that we know it's going to be either a victim or a suspect in violent crime, the folks we're focusing on. So hope that answers your question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it. Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, really a lot of them. Can someone, maybe Major Lesher, if you can explain us the heat mapping and what kind of data is driven from that and how is that being helpful in combating a lot of the gun violence that's going on across the city? That's my first question. So let's start with that one.
Okay, heat mapping is a tool we've used for a little while now. And so if you imagine a map of the city, and we'll pull data out of our record management system. So there's been victims of a robbery, but we'll stick more with gun violence. So if the robbery involves a weapon, it's gonna pop up as a pinpoint on the map. So we take certain gun crimes and we populate this map with that information. And so with that, you'll look at and you'll see focused areas that have much more gun violence related to their geographical locations than anywhere else in the city. So we know there's something obviously going on in this section of a neighborhood that there is the levels of gun violence is much more heightened there than anywhere else. So then we're going to use that to now, okay, who lives in this area, or who's frequenting this area? Is there a store in this area that is allowing maybe gun violence to occur, or individuals hanging out that's pulling the neighborhood down? So it's a first step that allows us to take a little bit of a deeper dive into what's going on in the neighborhood, so we can get some answers, and then work with our federal partners and then address those areas where possible.
I just have, this is a very, very personal subject for me because my ward is being inundated with gun violence. A ward that goes all the way from the north side to the east side to the south side through Middlebury. It has become very overwhelming dealing with all the gun violence. I would appreciate Chairman Kamer, when we have our next meeting, if we could get Sergeant Dorn involved in this meeting so he could talk about the gun violence reduction team, I would really appreciate that. And I know Councilman Freeman bought a Shot Spotter, and we bought them in, and they did a symposium for us with their program. And I know Canton and Youngstown were using it. Canton is still seeing an uptick in gun violence. And I know there's a million other vendors out there, but I think we also need to keep in mind the fact that we have a lot of money that's coming into the city through the American Rescue Plan. And I think we need to be intentional about how we're using that money as it relates to this gun violence in these neighborhoods. If that means that it's painful to hear us to keep saying we're talking about stuff and we're meeting with people when we have all this money coming in here. We have people who now want, whether it's Ring or another vendor, cameras on their houses. If we have to put them up in certain communities, I know there were supposed to be cameras that at some point was supposed to be put up in Hillwood Homes. That never happened. I don't know what happened with that, but something we can talk about offline. I just want us to be a little more intentional when we talk about all this money that's about to come into here, because from the time, I want to say April 19th, 2 Mondays ago, when the request went to our chairman about making the meeting for this, and I appreciate him doing that, there has been 31 gun-related incidents since he made that request. And I'm getting that directly off of the police reports. 2 of those individuals within those reports that I can see are now deceased, 127, 148. The gun violence is not going to wait on us. And we've got to figure something out, because we have people burying their kids left and right. And it's becoming, it has been and continues to be an issue within our communities, but even a bigger one now, because people are afraid to even sit on their porches. And even as we talk about the Ring cameras, we can put them on the poles or on the street lights. People are walking up on people's porches, shooting into their windows. Like, they don't even care at this point. But at least if they have a tool there that can at least give them some peace that this individual could possibly be caught, I think it helps. A lot of these individuals, when I look at these police reports, I'm from the neighborhood, live in the neighborhood, my family's still in the neighborhood, and I know a lot of this stuff is retaliation. I know that. And they're not stopping. And they're going to people's houses, people who don't have cameras, who can't afford cameras. And they're not stopping because they seem to think that we're okay with the stuff they're doing, and we're not okay with it. I just think we need to be more proactive than reactive. And it's like we're chasing them, and they're out here committing crimes and killing people left and right. And it is making all of us, not just me, all of us lose sleep, because it's not just happening in just Ward 5. I'm just pulling reports every day and I see that it's happening in Ward 5, but it's happening in all of our wards. So if we could, as a council, talk about how much of our money we should be using towards something, I think we need to do that, because it's only getting worse. I'm scared to even think about what happens in 6 weeks when we reconvene, because we're going to be just a couple weeks off from the 4th of July. And these individuals don't care. I know we talk about the park and walks. We were doing the officer on the porch for a little while, and just to see how that was going to work. I think we need to go back to that, because I do believe some of our residents will be open to doing that. I'm open to doing that. They can come sit on the porch at my house with me. I'm okay with that. My mom is okay with that. I know car number 5A comes past my house every single day when they're out. They wave, sometimes they slow down, but I see them all the time. And I think that's what a lot of our residents need to see. They need to see those officers in the neighborhood. Even if they just pass them by and they wave, it starts to give them comfort, where then eventually they'll talk to them. And I think that's what we need to do, because the gun violence is not going to wait for us to put something in place. It's going to continue until we actually put something in place to curb it. And those are just my thoughts. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mr.
Yes.
Can I just follow up with response to the Councilwoman's question? The Hill and Homes camera you talked about 2 weeks ago, the ownership transferred over, and that individual who was now going to be managing that development reached out to me about those cameras. He also was supposed to reach out to Major Capers. So I just want to make sure you understood that and knew that. So, and Mr. Kramer, thank you for that time.
Thank you. I do see next up is Councilman Malik, unless you want to yield to Councilman. Actually, I had Councilman Fusco next. Sorry about that. Councilman Fusco.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. And I just wanted to thank the Akron Police Department for taking the time and laying out everything that you're doing. In these times, the police departments are taking on the chin in a lot of ways, but it sounds as though you are doing so much right now, and we appreciate it, but there's so much more needs to be done. And I don't like the fact that, oftentimes we said it's a national thing. You guys are actually going out and doing it. There's a lot of interest on council. There's a lot of interest in our city. My question kind of goes to, and some of us, I know myself, it's like, I don't want to assume anything, but the guns that are being used out there, I assume Major Lisa, you could answer this, they are illegal guns. Am I right? They're the illegal guns, not the ones that are registered, not the ones that, that people go and get their permits and etc. These are illegal guns, correct?
Correct. And yeah, thank you for making that clarification. So the folks that we arrest, or majority of them, they are not allowed to possess a weapon from the beginning, and they still are able to get a weapon. So it's not the legal gun ownership that generally concerns us, it's the illegal possession of firearms. Thank you, sir, for that clarification.
And that's the thing I think I would like to focus on legislatively, all of us as a council. That's what I'm thinking we need to focus on. And Major, and thank you for sharing everything. And but the piece about there's very little teeth in terms of perhaps existing law. That's perhaps where we should work with law department, where we should work collectively together on the illegal guns. The national narrative is that, guns, 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 but it's the illegal guns that are out there. And how do we legislatively, as a city, as a council, address that? And what can we do to give more teeth, to provide more teeth? And at least from our perspective, I mean, we can talk about funding and trying to, all these other things that we're speaking of. And absolutely, I support every effort that can be taken. But this is the one piece that I'd like us to talk about further, Chairman, in terms of maybe there is something that we can do. I don't know if there isn't or isn't, but I think it's worth at least discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Just before I call on anyone else, I echo what Councilman Fusco said, and then obviously Councilwoman Samples, she made me think, next time we meet, if it's 5 or 6 weeks from now, hopefully Deputy Mayor Charlie Brown, hopefully you can come back to council, and I'll call it like a wish list, but hopefully you can come back and say, hey, members of council, this is what we need, or this is something that can really, propel us further, faster, to try to get a hold on gun violence in our neighborhoods. I mean, I know Councilwoman Samples said a lot of things that really hit me too. So hopefully she's in agreement that hopefully 5 or 6 weeks, whenever we decide to try to discuss this again, or even if it's sooner, you folks can come back and say, this is what we need. And if you're able to make this happen, let's move forward. These are the tools of the trade that we need. So hopefully you guys can talk in the coming weeks and see what you can do for us. And we'll see what we can do. Councilman Malik, then I have Councilman Neal and Councilwoman Amobian. And just remember, 1 o'clock starts planning. Go ahead, Councilman Malik.
Since I've already spoken, I'll yield to Mr. Neal and wait on my comments. Although I would say, I believe we only have one new piece in planning. Perhaps we could go over, and if we do need to move into planning, I would say that I think this is a conversation that shouldn't wait 5 or 6 weeks. Hopefully we can continue it sooner. But anyway,
Absolutely.
I'll yield to
Councilman Fusco, are you okay with that?
Yes, if I could. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Malik. I wanted to mention that before. We don't have any public hearings, so if we want to go into overtime on this particular committee, I believe all we have is one piece of new legislation. So that's okay if we go a little bit over, no problem whatsoever. And one last thing, I do want to echo that I do so much appreciate Ms. Sample's comments as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman. So back to, I kind of lost track. I think it's Councilman or Councilwoman Omobian, or did I have Councilman Neal?
Councilman Neal was next, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for the meeting. I want to speak to the issues about illegal guns and Councilman Fusco. This is where it's going to take a collaborative effort, a comprehensive effort. I mean, when we have where people can go to our Summit County fairgrounds when they have these gun shows and buy guns right out of people's cars before they even get into the show, that's a problem. It's going to take holistic legislative change on how these things happen. But I agree with you, the illegal guns. I mean, we have to listen to our young people when they're telling us where they're getting them from. We have to put pressure on the corner stores where they say they're getting them from. If they're telling us, we need to listen to them. But the other thing is, I hear from people all the time where you can walk up to county fairgrounds, and before you even get into the gun show, people have their trunks lift up where you could buy guns. So it's going to take us working with our county representatives, and of course, our state representatives. But what I'd like to know is, how comprehensive is the data being shared where, say, like with our neighborhood assistance department, where we have problem homes, where they're getting information about a potential drug house so that we could check and see if there are any housing ordinances, fines that we could bring against them, or where they have a problem with a house and it's being shared with the police department so that we could cross-reference that data. And then more importantly, I heard some of the partners, how I'd like to see us be more strategic in working with our neighborhood groups. And that gets back to the part, Major or Deputy, not Acting Chief. I don't know what the right title is. I don't want to disrespect you, but Major Capers, but in regards to our calls and if we could tell what level calls could be addressed if we create sort of like a neighborhood ambassador position, where we could have folks work with our police department to address some of these calls and identify some of these things. And the last thing I want to say is in regards to the Ring cameras, you kind of run into the same challenge that you do with police cams, where you've got to pay for the, you could have the camera where you can see, but it's an extra fee to pay to keep the recording. So as we look at that, what we may want to look at is mobile cameras where we could set up, put them in cars that we could park in neighborhoods and things of that nature. Not saying cameras on people's homes won't work, but because just of how this violence is all over the place and there are different hotspots at times, we may want to think of being innovative of not just putting them on poles, but putting them in cars that we could park on streets, other things to that. And last but not least, I know you've looked at this, Mr. Brown, but how far are we from using drone technology to survey areas as well?
Okay, I heard a couple of questions in there, and thank you for both. And the one you talked about, is there a cooperation or collaboration between other city departments as relates to drug activity or other issues that could be addressed in a wholesale response? There is and has been for a while. So that I mean, it includes drugs, it could be science, it could be home, I mean, it could be a lot of different things, homes in disrepair that attract those types of nuisances that we don't want in our city. So that does take place now. And then, gosh, I forgot the second one. Repeat your second one. I can't remember it, sir. I apologize. Your second question. The last one you asked.
Oh, the last one was about drones.
Okay, yeah. So it's something that we are really looking at. You know, we have to get the proper ordinances, the proper the operating procedures to do that. So we're looking at some of those technologies as well. So we are. And I know, Mr. Chair, that committed to an hour. A major leaser has a 1 o'clock. So if we go over, I would respectfully request this only a short period of time because he has a meeting. So I would appreciate that in advance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, we'll move forward. I do see Councilwoman Amobian and Malik and then President Somerville.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say, and I want to say it quickly, that I totally agree with Councilwoman Samples when she referred to the money that we have coming in, because we shouldn't spare any expense, because there's no way we're going to be able to grow our city and keep residents here and all of that without reducing the violence that we're experiencing in our community. So if we could, if it appears to be terribly expensive, you know, bring it to council and let us do a special approval. But I think we should use some of these dollars, as many as we need, to attack this problem in every which way we can, and do the best we can, and let the public know that this is what we're doing with this pot of money, because I don't think we are at the point where we can spare any expense if we have the dollars available, because, you know, this is a once in a lifetime pot of money that we're going to get. So we need to do the best we can. So thank you very much.
Good comment. Good comment. Thank you. Councilman Malik and then Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just kind of returning to the point that we kind of discussed earlier about community engagement, I think, you know, one of the concerns that I have, and we've had this conversation in previous meetings, is that most of our patrol officers, you know, spend most of their time on calls for service, and that's because of the call volume. But, you know, when we look at trying to make sure that we are doing the best community engagement that we can, right? Even looking to the point that Major Leaser brought up about kind of the well of patrol and how you have to balance against patrol and all the other more specialized units. I think, you know, I've heard throughout our Reimagining Public Safety conversation similar concerns, but it seems like what we really need to do is find a way that as many officers as possible within patrol can be doing community engagement and can have, you know, free time for some of their shifts in a dedicated way, and really kind of achieve a more community-oriented form of policing. Because frankly, it seems like we are, you know, in a fundamentally reactive model. We have been for many years, and that's not to denigrate a lot of the work that's been done. I know that Chief Ball spent a lot of time working on staffing and figuring out how that the staffing workloads and the shifts. I know it's very complicated, but, you know, even going back to the perf report, it seems that fundamentally we need to find a way that those patrol officers are spending more of their time walking the beat, interacting with people, forming relationships, forming trust, and then that will help us get more information and address this information deficit that we have.
So a couple of things about that, Councilman Malik. One is, and you mentioned it, we are doing a ton of community engagements. I think the number approached 300 last year. There's only 365 days in the year. So we are doing that sort of stuff. However, we do understand the strong need to continue to engage with the community. And when you do a staffing study, that tells you how many officers you need to be able to have on staff to enable you to have 30% of your time available to do those things that you're talking about. And that all comes back to staffing issues that we can talk about more later at a more opportune time.
I think that's, and I hear you. I think that what leads into the conversation we've had about potentially also recognizing that there are some calls, some non-emergency calls, non-violent calls that can potentially be dealt with by the social service responder, mental health responder. Last week, I was walking Nervous Dog Cafe on Market Street, and there was a guy who clearly having a mental health episode. He lay down in the middle of Market Street. It's 5 p.m. on a weekday. And, he didn't have a weapon. It's not clear to me that I called the police. I called and an officer I know responded. And, there was nothing further that happened. But I think that situations like that are potentially ways that we can say, a trained mental health professional could respond to that call and would be safe in responding to that call. I have shared with Deputy Mayor Brown, there are pilot programs across the country that we could look into with the rescue plan funds. I really think that this is an opportunity here to address the calls for service and take some of that off of the department's plate.
Sure, we're always open to those conversations. However, even in the situation you described yourself, it wouldn't be safe for the private citizen responder to stop traffic to enable that engagement to happen. So it would still require a police response. I understand what you're saying, but we need to be smart about how we do that if that's the direction we decide to go.
And that's where I think a pilot program that really will help us determine those parameters is needed. Because I agree with you, these are messy situations. Every call is different, but I really think that it's the direction we should look at.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilman. I see Council President Somerville is up next. Council President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, I appreciate us, looking at data and being very intentional about that. But I wanted to kind of talk about call-ins. And I think Deputy Mayor Brown, if you can kind of speak to that. I don't know if we're still doing call-ins. I know other cities have done that. I mean, there's no secret. We know who the people who are causing the trouble and who have the guns. We know who they are. And so I'm just wondering, I know other cities have had some success by being intentional, calling those individuals in and giving them some options, right? Giving them an opportunity to really kind of change and turn their lives around. And so are we still doing call-ins? What's the status with that? And I think, Major Brown, you've been in some conversations about some programs like that. I think me and you were actually in a meeting together about that.
Yes, and we're not doing call-ins, but it just so happens last week the mayor sent me an email to kind of look at that is taking place in another city. It's called a quick response team to violence, and it includes some of those components. Certainly, I wanted to look at that again, and to be honest with it, we weren't really as successful with the call-ins as we would like to be. I personally went to the jail a couple of times with Bob Fiatal, who are partnering with me on this program before. So clearly we'll look at anything we can do to help reduce the violence. And so thank you for your question. And we'll see what we can do with this quick response team initiative as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council President Somerville. With that, I guess we'll end this, but before we end, I think there's a lot of us council members. I'll try to get something scheduled sooner than later. And then also, I think a lot of us members of council, we're asking the Akron Police Department to come to us and let us know what we can try to do on our end to help move forward. So anything else, Charlie Brown? I end it with you before I adjourn.
I would like to say thanks to the chair, Mr. Kamer, and the other members of the Public Safety Committee and Council as a whole for your attention in this matter and your concerns. It is our #1 concern, is reducing gun violence in our city. So thanks for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and I'll try to put something else together moving forward, and we're adjourned. Thanks.
Okay, we can move right into the Planning and Economic Development Committee. Those committee members are Fusco, Kamer, Swirsky, Baylor, and Samples. We do have all committee members present except for Swirsky. Councilman Fusco, are you ready?
Let's take a quick minute here to kind of like regroup.
Okay.
Just about a minute or so. Thank you. Make sure everyone's okay and set the jet, good to go. I assume we're continuing live. We are. Good. Okay, very good. We'll go ahead and begin the Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council. Roll call, Sarah?
Fusco,
Aye.
Hamer,
Aye.
Swirsky, Baylor,
Aye.
Samples.
Aye.
All committee members are present except for Swirsky.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the previously held meeting.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? The ayes have it. Very good. In terms of the regular agenda, there's no public hearings, obviously, today. There is one item, though. Hopefully someone's here in reference to the item number 7, the temporary summer patio legislation. Is there anyone here on this? Okay. Okay, very good. We can always come back to that item. Other than that, I do believe we do have one item that's on the new list of legislation. So we will address that at this point. That is the approving the sale of city-owned property pursuant to the city's A Lot for Little program in order to facilitate the productive reuse of the property and to reduce the cost to the city and the taxpayers in maintaining vacant lots. Someone here on this?
I am.
Okay, Mr. Wheat.
Yes. We want to sell this property to to Barbara J. McDonald at 454 Douglas Street. We're selling the property for $248.
Very good, saw that. This is our typical price?
Yes, that's our typical price.
Okay, very good, thank you. Is consent agenda okay on this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any questions from any committee members? Any council members? Okay, very good. We can entertain a motion for consent agenda. That's okay.
Motion for consent, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? The ayes have it. Very good. Thank you all. Very good. With that, I do know we do have some folks here that are to present on the Civic Commons. I understand. I see Michelle DeFiore here. I also see a friend, Dan Rice, to the city. Basically everyone, I think. Dan Rice is here, which we welcome him as well to the Planning Committee of Akron City Council. I assume, should I pass this over to you, Michelle, or we'll let you go ahead and begin? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for having us today. I'm Michelle DeFiore with the Mayor's Office of Integrated Development, and I've been working with Dan Rice for several years on the status of the Akron Civic Commons, the work of the Summit Lake Vision Plan and the Lock 3 Vision Plan. We were with you about a year ago in January to get your approval on some projects at Summit Lake in regards to the Ohio and Erie Canal Summit Lake Trail. And we wanted to use today to give you an update on where we are with the project. And I will share my screen and I'll turn it over to Dan Rice.
Good afternoon, members of council. Thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity. To be perfectly honest with you, I would much rather be in person as we were about 14 months ago, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to be in person soon, hopefully sometime this year. But on behalf of our organization, our funders, the City of Akron residents, thank you so much for your incredible support for Akron Civic Commons. In what has transpired in over a year that we've met, we made a lot of progress on the development for the planning for these two incredible park spaces right in the heart of our community, Lock 3 and Summit Lake. And so that's what we're here today, is to come back to give you a progress report on that. And so what you see up here in front of you
is an updated rendering from Olin Studios, showing a lot of activity in Lot 3. It's a little bit different than obviously the way it looks today. A lot more greenery, a lot more trees, just some random people walking around looking at artwork, maybe having a picnic. But that's really what we're trying to capture here. Lot 3, as we all know, functions exceptionally well as an event and a concert and a festival site, but probably not so well as just a general park site. And so that's what we're really trying to change. And then the next slide actually is of Summit Lake. And as you all are very familiar, really through your incredible support, we've been able to really leverage a lot of private, local, state, and federal funding to really turn Summit Lake into a neighborhood park for the neighborhood residents. That's really what our focus is. And as the slide indicates here, it doesn't function that well right now. On the east side, it definitely has a very active community center, very active reach center, heavily used, but not all the way around the lake. And that's what we're going to try to achieve with the trail that goes all the way around that connects to the Highway Near Canal, Towpatch Trail, and then a real destination on the North Shore with the canoe and kayak share, because we really believe in equity in public spaces and that everybody should have access to accessible, equitable, welcoming parks, trails, and open spaces, regardless of your race, your income, education, or experience. Maybe get an ice cream cone, get a cup of coffee, get a sandwich, maybe have a family reunion picnic. Those are the type of activities we'd like to see on the North Shore. So we'll just kind of dive right into a number of these slides. We're going to first focus on Lot 3. And again, this project starts and begins with the city, particularly the residents, because the residents took a chance on us because there's literally been decades of things being done to and not with, and things that promised and not delivered. So we're trying to really reverse that. But really, we also owe a debt of gratitude to City of Akron Mayor Horrigan, City of Akron Council President Margaret Somerville, and the entire Akron Council, because you took a risk on allowing us to try to raise literally millions of dollars and work with neighborhood residents. And what you see here is a result of those conversations with neighborhood residents. This is of Lot 3, showing kind of that meandering serpentine walkway with lots of vegetation, lots of trees, looking more towards the pavilion, performance pavilion, as well as in the wintertime, it'll be an ice skating rink. So where we are with our fundraising, when we last talked, we kicked it off with a $10 million project for both Summit Lake and a $10 million project for Lot 3. And really because of the city's leadership, we are proud to say that 14 months later, we have raised, working together with the city, $13,637,500. And yes, we do keep track of every dollar that goes towards this project. And so we are just $6,362,500 away from our fundraising goal. And we are confident through local government support, private donations, corporations and foundations, the state of Ohio, and federal funding, we are going to meet that fundraising goal. Our goal is to actually close out our campaign this year, but we owe a debt of gratitude to you because it was 14 months ago where you said, yes, let's go for this. And because of that, we've been able to raise $13.6 million. And it's been my honor and pleasure to work with Michelle. She is absolutely amazing to work with. She just knows all the details from a design build perspective. And so we're just proud to enter into this partnership with the city of Akron. And so you have a really great city employee and Michelle. I'll pause. Does anybody have any questions about the fundraising so far? Because I know money is always an issue. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any about this, or maybe at the end of the presentation.
I think it would be better, if you don't mind, Mr. Rice, at the very end, what we'll do is we'll save it all for that. And then I'll ask all the committee members and then the council members if there's questions or comments, and then because they may direct it to who knows who. So if you could please proceed. Thanks.
That sounds good, Councilman Fusco. Thank you so much. So Lot 3 Park, this is the Garden Grove, which in the summertime, you might go down there and maybe have your laptop computer with the internet, Wi-Fi access, maybe work outside or grab a cup of coffee or an ice cream cone. In the wintertime, this turns into the ice skating rink that has actually a little bit of an oval shape to it with the trees in the middle of it. The next slide is really an amazing shot of what we think Lot 3 could look like in the summertime with the concert. And so you see a lot of the people there on the lawn. You also see some hard seating right there around the performance pavilion. But it really has literally like a blossom type feel to it with the trees and the lawn and the artwork. And then you see up there on the sidewalk there by Main Street, really kind of a seamless connection there between Main Street and Lot 3. It really serves as a balcony into the space. So even though if you're not necessarily on the lawn or sitting right up in front of the performance pavilion, you might actually still be able, to really experience the vibrancy of this great public space. Next slide. And then this obviously is a nighttime view of Lot 3, the winter view. And we really like this because it showcases the ice skating rinks. You see the two different facilities there, one for just general people ice skating, and the other one for more events like the bumper boats or the bicycles on ice. And then, of course, you see the choir performing there at the performance pavilion. So still a lot of activity. And I just also want to kind of qualify it that these concepts are based upon some ideas to date. We intend on going back out to the public and asking them, what they would like to see in Lot 3. When they think of their great parks across the country, what attracts them to go to those public spaces? What do they do in those public spaces? And why would they want to take their family there? So we are committed to continue our Akron Civics Commons process of really engaging our neighborhood residents. The next public space area is Summit Lake, and I'm going to really let Michelle take the lead on that. We'll kind of go back and forth. Michelle?
Sure. So I think all of you have seen the Summit Lake Vision Plan, and this was a 30,000-foot view on the North Shore area where we had done some public outreach and asking the residents what they wanted to see here. But we actually took it a step further. And last summer, we dove a little bit deeper into the details with the residents leading the way on the specifics of what they wanted to see in this space. We actually went to the Summit Lake Farmers Market in the fall, and the residents led the way with asking other residents on what they wanted to see. They were the ones presenting the project. They were the ones, talking about how excited they are that this is coming to their neighborhood. So you can see here the things that they're asking for in the site design: a boat launch, a boardwalk, a beach access. So again, these were meetings that the residents held with other residents looking for input on this plan. So again, this was the 30,000-foot view that EDG had done originally. These were the things that we had heard from the residents at the time: the boat ramp, the bridge connection, the North Shore, the boardwalk area. And we wanted to make sure from the residents that these were the things that they wanted to see. And in fact, they were, based on that input that we had received. We also got feedback on what style the residents wanted to see the building on. And you can see on the left, they were looking at a modern Metro Park facility, a sleek simplicity facility. And then actually the middle area is reminiscent of the buildings that were at Summit Lake when it was an amusement park. So this is actually the rendering that the residents came up with over the past year. We've got an entrance drive coming in off of South Street. We've got boat parking because there is no boat parking at the existing boat ramp near the Summit Lake Community Center. We've got a boathouse coming in off of the trail. You can see the bridge connection to the existing path, and you've got the towpath. Well, we call it the Ohio and Erie Canal Summit Lake Trail that meanders through the site. We have an event lawn, and we have a pavilion where the residents can gather. So this zooms into the event space, to the pavilion space. We've got restrooms. We've got a fireplace. We've got picnic tables so that residents can reserve this area for various events. This is the image of what the pavilion is expected to look like. Again, we're in the lake looking at the pavilion. So you've got picnic tables, you've got a fireplace. And it's just a nice area with some covered seating. Again, this is just some more detail on what that pavilion space will look like. And then we end with the view of the lake. This is really what gets you out there. This is really what the residents are going to be seeing as they're using the North Shore activity area space. And just to give you an update on the status of the projects, we've got 2 projects at Summit Lake right now. We have the Ohio and Erie Canal Summit Lake Trail. We have 70% plans that are being reviewed, and we're looking at construction later this fall. And then the North Shore Activity Area, which is the area I just showed you, will be moving into detailed design this year and likely construction next year.
We're just so grateful for our partnership with the city of Akron and the city of Akron neighborhood residents because we could not do this without their support. Actually, you can go to the next slide if you want to, Michelle. I mean, that just really kind of shows our committee. We have a committee of residents. Bill and Becky Constantine are chairing our individual donor campaign. City of Akron Council President Margaret Somerville has agreed to be on the committee. You see, of that $7 million that we still had to raise, we want to raise at least 4 million of that through individual contributions. And you see what we've been able to raise to date there, 1.5. We still need to raise 2.4. So we're making good progress, but we could not do this without our partnership. And so on behalf of the Ohio and Erie Canalway Coalition and our Akron Civic Commons partners, thank you so much for your incredible support for these transformational public spaces. And really, we feel it's a once in a generation opportunity to create these accessible, equitable, and welcoming parks, trails, and public spaces for our city of Akron residents.
Thank you. Thank you. And I tell you what, those renderings were certainly impressive. Looking at those, I was thinking to myself, it's like, I want to live there. I want to go there. I want to be there. So and Mr. Rice, your success is, it's amazing in terms of all over the years, how much you've done for our community, not only Akron, but the entire trail and everything over the years. Appreciate all of your effort. And we know that Michelle is truly an asset for our city in terms of moving things forward. The one thing is it's also impressive in terms of the committee that we're looking at right now, all the names on there and everyone who's been part of this, that all we can do is cheer and hope this you meet these goals, the rest of the goals, and get this completed. If we could open up the screen though, I would appreciate that because I'd like to entertain questions. If any committee, we'll open it up right now to any committee members if they have questions in reference to the that we received here today. Again, very impressive, very, very impressive. Questions from committee members at this point. Not seeing any. Is there any questions from any? Ms. Samples.
Thank you, Chairman Fusco. Dan, what's maybe you or Michelle can answer this. What is you guys' deadline to have all of this to make all this happen where the residents down there will actually see it in fruition?
That's a great question, Councilwoman. We're really on kind of parallel timelines at both of these spaces. Summit Lake's a little bit ahead of the schedule because, as Michelle said, we heard from the neighborhood residents, the number one project they want to see is the trail connected to the Ohio and Erie Canal Towpatch Trail. And so as Michelle indicated, that is in 70% final design for construction. And we set a goal last fall that we wanted just to put a target out there of having a groundbreaking in September of this year. So it's our goal, it's our target. We may not make September, but sometime in the fall range, we want to do a groundbreaking so that trail is actually under construction and actually completed by early, maybe spring or summer of 2022. And then for actually the North Shore work, we intend on bidding that project in February of 2022 and have it under construction during 2022 and actually completed by 2023. And in Lot 3 is on a similar path. We need to do the final design. We actually just entered into the contract for a final design for Lot 3. And the goal would be that is actually bid in February of 2022 and construction starting in September of 2022, which also would be hopefully completed by 2023. So it is a very short window here. It's really aggressive, but that's what our hope is, Councilwoman.
Thank you. And final question. I heard you mention boats down at Summit Lake. It's sort of kind of, the picture looks almost like you're going to have a beach area. How I just want to know the plan for that, especially with the boats. I've been on the pontoon down there. But I'm trying to think, how do you bring boats in? You have the beach area there. Is there like a plan to drain and refill Summit Lake? I don't know. I'll just have all kinds of questions because the markup looks wonderful. I'm just trying to see, how do you do the beach and the boats?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilwoman. And please know that we have the same concerns and questions that you've had, particularly, with litter in the water and safety, because, safety is our number one priority. And if I could just kind of take you back a little bit, when we first started working on this project in 2016, 17, the first reaction of neighborhood residents was to put a fence around the lake to try to keep people from getting access, because they were worried about maybe people would walk into the lake and drown, because you couldn't tell where the water began and the land ended. And so what we found is when we tested that idea right by the Summit Lake Community Center, where we just kind of create a little bit of almost a beach area where people could dip their toe in the water, they actually got more comfortable with it. And so we want to continue that theme on the North Shore, with creating a safe access where people can maybe just dip their toe in the water. We're not encouraging swimming because you'd have to have lifeguards and things of that nature. But what we've also learned with these free canoe and kayak trips is people are really, they want to, have a safe experience with the water. And so that's why we have that kind of square in area where it's easy to get in and out of the water. We will continue those free guided canoe trips. And then the other thing we're really excited about is we learned this from Philadelphia. Not everybody who owns a canoe or kayak has a place to store it. And oftentimes some people who want to rent a canoe or kayak can't afford to. So great, we will provide free storage for their canoe or kayak, but part of the deal is they have to allow their canoe or kayak to be used by a resident who wants to use it. And so it will all be supervised. We do it right now, starting in June, running June through October. And we will continue that. That's part of our commitment to the city, is a 15-year commitment to work with you to help steward this great space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome, Councilwoman.
Good question.
Any further questions or comments from anyone? I do appreciate the idea of capitalizing on one of our greatest assets, water. And that's great, because it seems as though we have quite a few resources like that, but we haven't capitalized, for lack of a better term, over the last several decades. And so obviously the ratepayers, especially in terms of the water sewer, the sewer billing, we have a significant investment. And so it's good timing, I think, and it also continues to tell the story, of that investment and what we're doing here. And so I would encourage that as being part of the narrative as well. That would be good. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Rice or Ms. DeFiore? Any whatsoever? We're not seeing any. I want to thank you both. Especially Mr. Rice, every once in a while you come in, and we really appreciate, again, all you do for our community. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And of course, Michelle, thank you for all your hard work with the city. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. We're not going to adjourn just yet in terms of the committee. We do have someone here, from what I understand. Alyssa Gregg is here in terms of the item number 7 on our regular agenda, which is ordinance authorizing the mayor to implement a temporary summer patio program, approving the guidelines for the temporary summer patio program. So yes, any comments, Ms. Gregg?
It's the same program that we did last year. There were no complaints. We had 8 applicants last year for this program. James has committed to pushing it harder this year. We get every city department to review it online through Submittable. We also have the Summit County Public Health official signing off on them on the same permit. So it keeps the program streamlined. She has informed me that her review time may be a little bit longer this year because she is also working the COVID vaccine clinics, but it remains the same.
Very good. Thank you so much. The one thing too, and thinking about this earlier today, is that and I know we have an existing ordinance that permits these kind of cafes, sidewalk cafe, what have you. Do we have an existing ordinance, and this is kind of like opening it up a little bit more, but I would like to see us even, over and above that. And I'd be happy to have a discussion about that, after COVID, post COVID, what have you, trying to open that even more and encouraging more and more use of that public area. And I know that we've been thinking about that, obviously, but even more so, I'd like to see more of that throughout the city, the entire city.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. Mr. Malik, I see your hand is up. Now I don't see anyone else's. So Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Craig. Could we get the locations from last year via email, just so that we can review that?
Yeah, just the business names and the locations for them.
Yeah, and also I'm sure that, if and when this program is approved, I certainly think it's a great program. We could also, if we could also get the copy of this year's application so that we can share with, our local neighborhood business districts.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. Any further questions or comments? Is there a rush on this? Is consent agenda okay, or would you prefer that it pass? I mean, it is, we are into May. I don't know what the timing is for y'all.
The original goal is out the window at this point. We had down for today. I think consent is fine at this point, honestly.
Okay, but we can certainly, like I said, I think this is, like I said, we've had a week to kind of like look it over. This is basically something we've done before in the past, and we've seen some success with it. I'm not adverse at all to reporting this out tonight. Is there a desire for that? Is there a recommendation from committee for suspension of the rules with a favorable report?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. The ayes have it. Anything else to come before the committee?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for presenting. Appreciate it. If there isn't anything else, we will adjourn, and I'll pass it over to Ms. Viviano.
Okay, our next committee for the day is the Housing and Neighborhood Assistance Committee, and that will begin at 3:15. Those committee members are Fusco, Swirsky, Samples, McKittrick, and Connor. Again, that will begin at 3:15 today. So we'll stop the live stream now and be back at 3:15. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.